Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's story, a homeowner association neighbor from hell dumped toxic chemicals in my rented dumpster. I got her kicked out of the neighborhood. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I think a lot of people can relate to having a bad neighbor, but never really being able to catch them or get them in trouble for the stunts they pull. For me, it was mainly because I lived next to an HOA board member that seemed to not think that any of the rules applied to her. She did not break any kinds of laws, only HOA rules, and yet she would go around and fine everybody for the smallest thing while getting away with it even when she was reported. Trying to get back at this horrible person seemed almost impossible until one event happened. The thing that bugged me the most about her was that she flaunted the fact that she would break an HOA rule. They had it in the bylaws that nobody could operate a business out of their home. There were more fine print things like working from home was fine, but they basically did not want you having customers coming to your house and taking up all the street parking. My neighbor was a hairdresser who constantly had clients parking on the street. Still, nothing could be done, and she was not going to get a fine because she was part of the HOA. Going back to me for a minute, I ended up renting one of those portable dumpsters that you can just hitch onto the back of your car to move it. We had to clean out the basement after a small flooding incident as well as some other odds and ends, deciding it was best to just do it all at once so we did not need to spend any more money renting the dumpster twice. The morning we got it was the start of a little bit of a weird day since I had to go and work a double shift. This meant I left the house at about 4 p.m. and did not get back home until about 6 a.m. I was so tired I wanted to just crawl right into bed and sleep. Instead though, I noticed that the dumpster was basically full. This did not make any sense since it should have still been empty, so I took a look inside of it. There was old moldy furniture in it that I knew did not belong to my house. There was also some kind of chemical smell that made me back off right away because I was worried I would get sick from it. I wanted to figure out what was going on, but anybody that has worked a double shift knows that there comes a point where your body is not going to let you stay awake any longer. I fell asleep hard until about 2 p.m. and remembered the trash. I went outside again only to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA and they were fining me $200 for having a dumpster full of probable hazardous waste that smelled on my property. I was more confused than I had ever been and wanted to find out exactly where all of this crap had come from. I had video cameras luckily, and while they could not catch what happened off my property, they got enough. So, while I was gone, the HOA neighbor had hitched the dumpster onto her car and drove it off my property, and I can only assume onto hers. Then fast forward until the middle of the night, when everybody else would be sleeping, she drove it back onto my property and put it in the same spot. In a world without consequences, I would have walked over and slapped her across the face. I knew very well she was behind fining me for this too. I can only guess the chemicals were stuff used on hair and probably were meant to be disposed of in a proper way. I was not going to take this sitting down though, and instead planned to go to the next HOA meeting and fight the fine. I was also forced in the meantime to pay to return the full dumpster and got stuck paying for an extra dump, but I had a plan for that too. At the HOA meeting, I told them that I wanted to argue the fine that I received because it was unjust. Of course, neighbor started talking right away about how she lived right next to me and she saw and could smell the horrible stuff that I put in the dumpster. She even pulled out a photo of the dumpster from after she put it back for evidence. I don't know how you can smell hazardous materials through a photo, but whatever. I told them that I had my own video evidence and pulled out the video from my security camera. As the recording played, you could see the face of my neighbor go from a smug smile to a very nervous red face. She was finally caught in front of so many people that she had no way to get out of it. Even the other members of the HOA looked horrified at what she had done. To preserve the HOA and to save themselves from a lawsuit, she was kicked out of the HOA, and soon the entire town knew about what she had done. I went up to her privately and handed her the bill from dumping the extra trash. I told her that she could pay me and be done with it, or I could take her to court and also charge her for trespassing, theft and dumping without a permit. She obviously wrote me a check to try and get herself out of any further trouble. The entire neighborhood despised her after that and started to fully shun her. Also, without her HOA protection, she was no longer allowed to keep her hair salon business out of her living room. Nobody wanted to talk to her, and whispers about her were always going around about how they couldn't believe somebody would do that to their neighbor. It was too much for her, and by the end of that year, I noticed a for sale sign on her property. I don't want to say that I am glad my actions caused her to be shunned out of the neighborhood, but I will say that I was glad she got what she deserved after constantly thinking that she was better than everybody else. The rules apply to everybody in a community, even the ones that have so-called power. If she had just acted like a responsible HOA board member and citizen, then there would have never been any problems. Outside of the HOA stuff, this woman did not really have anything else going on against her. She just abused her power to get things how she wanted, and it finally came back and bit her in the rear. I know that this can go one of two ways, where she goes to a new neighborhood and starts up the same old game she was playing, or she could learn from this and get a fresh start to be a better person. I know that the first option is more likely, but as much as I hated her, I hope she picks the second. I also hope that if she chooses to be an HOA neighbor from hell, her newest victim will be able to act a lot faster than I did to put her in her place. And yeah, Ripe Stars, time and time again, it seems like that people who really enjoy abusing power against others often find themselves in HOAs. Let me know in the comments if you would ever be willing to live in an HOA. The next one is titled Neighborhood Karen Gets Just Desserts. On Thursday, my entire lawn was turned into dirt to prepare it for resodding. My sprinkler system was also repaired. Friday, my lawn was resodded and my sprinkler system programmed to water every day, all within the city guidelines for resodding of lawns. While I was still talking to the man that resodded my lawn as he turned on the sprinkler system, this woman from 2 houses down was approaching my house and taking pictures and video. She walked away when the man walked towards her asking, "Can I help you? Seems harmless, right?" Saturday morning at 5:30 AM, this woman knocked on my door telling me that I should turn my sprinkler off since it is not my watering day. I explained to her that my lawn was resodded and I'm allowed to water every day for 3 to 4 weeks. She gave me a speech about how I am stealing water from the city, water that should be conserved so others won't have to worry about getting what they need. I told her that we are not in a drought and that once 1 month passes by, that my sprinkler system will be programmed to work on watering days only. I kept my cool, all the while she had her phone pointed right at me. I had enough, so I told her to leave and closed the door. Yesterday morning, she knocked on my door and began recording me. I reminded her that I was allowed to water every day for up to a month since my lawn was resodded and she needs to leave me alone. Door closed, and this morning, the same thing. I opened the door long enough to tell her if she did not stop harassing me early in the morning, I would press charges for harassment. About half an hour later, there was police at my door, and it seems that this Karen called the police saying I threatened her. I showed them the video surveillance of her taking pictures and video on Friday, and of her knocking on my door in the early AM hours shouting at me about my lawn. It was obvious from what I showed them that I was not the problem. I wished them a nice day. As I was closing my door, this Karen approaches them with her phone, showing pictures and video, and tried to say me saying I would call the police was a threat. I listened as they told her that it is obvious she is the one out of sorts and what she is doing is stalking and harassment. She yelled at them saying I was stealing city water, and then she shoved one of the officers. As she was being arrested, she kept shouting this was my fault and I better pay her bail. Fat chance. And obviously, Ripe Stars, if you would have been in this situation, you would have paid Karen's bail. Am I right? Anyway, let's continue to the next one. The next one is titled My Epic Tale of Revenge. Years ago, my, fortunately now ex-wife and I decided to change from the cozy single-story home we were in and get something with more space for us to spread out and live more comfortably. We had our late teenage son living with us, our 3 Rottweilers, plus I needed a dedicated study for my work. I'm in technology and often worked from home. After months of searching, we found our dream home. Beautiful 2-story, 4-bedroom plus study with huge amounts of space everywhere. Seriously huge, the laundry was bigger than my bedroom growing up. The quality of everything was amazing, square set walls, no cornices. Polished Tassie oak flooring, floor-to-high ceiling windows in the living areas and 2 walls comprising commercial-grade bistro doors that opened up an entire corner of the house onto the covered outdoor entertaining area. The standard of the build was no surprise. This was a display home up until it landed on the market. We were to be the first people to live in it. I'm going to gloss over months of details and pain, but we had problems with the place from day 2, literally. On night number 2, the plumbing under the ensuite shower gave out and leaked through the kitchen ceiling underneath it. A couple weeks later, during a monster storm, 3 of the light fixtures upstairs started leaking water. A month later, we noticed rusts starting to show through the rendering on the corners of the house. There were heaps of smallish, easy-to-fix problems, but the kicker was that the balcony adjoining the master bedroom at the front of the house actually started to sag down, to the point that it was unsafe to go out there due to risk of collapse. We were mostly amenable and nice through most of this. The vendor, also the builder of course, was a small business, and we had no interest in making his life any more difficult than it already was for a small business owner. But conversely, we were pouring a lot of our hard-earned money into the mortgage and we wanted what we paid for. But for his own reasons, the builder just kept making it difficult to get things fixed. There was a seemingly endless list of excuses for not turning up at agreed times, a non-stop torrent of blame directed at his subcontractors, and just plain bad behavior like dodging our calls and not responding to our emails. Of course, we started proceedings with our state Consumers Affairs department. After all, we were entitled to a statutory 7-year warranty on a new home. But that process takes time throughout which we were forced to endure issues like water leaks, a dangerous balcony we couldn't use, and a whole host of other issues that meant we were not enjoying our home. There shouldn't have been any dispute about his responsibility to fix these problems. He just chose to be an a-hole about it and make us go through the government process, presumably thinking we would give up before he was forced to do anything. At around the same time, we started getting the occasional knock at the door, only to open it and find a couple standing there with a brochure in their hands and our house pictured on the front. The first few of these conversations ended with us politely explaining that this was no longer a display house, it was our home. Without exception, they all apologized profusely and went away. After a month or so of this, I started to wonder, how was it that people still thought our house was a display home? I went looking and discovered that the builder's website still had our address listed for display. Despite repeated calls and emails, they steadfastly refused to remove our address from their website. This irritated me. These people would often come knocking on weekends, because that is when people go house shopping, right? But our pleas for the builder to update his site simply fell on deaf ears. However, enough was enough. An idea had formed. Did I mention I was in technology? First thing I did was scrape their website and set about the task of creating my own version of it using their exact look and feel. I highlighted every single problem we had found with the place. Every glamour shot was replaced with shots of the exact same feature, but showing the problems we had, just like rust showing through the rendering, water leaking from the light fixtures, close-ups of the sagging balcony, etc. You get the idea. By the time I was done, I had what I felt was the perfect alternate version of their website, one that highlighted every single defect in the home, as well as calling out all the problems we had in dealing with the builder. I even included testimonials that were simple copies of the BS emails and texts we received from the builder, avoiding his responsibilities and making lame excuses for not fixing our problems. The headline testimonial was the one where he responded with, "So just don't go out on the balcony," when I pointed out the clear safety risk it represented. After getting a lawyer friend to check through each page to make sure I was not opening myself up to some form of legal action, he helped me change a few sections, chuckling the whole time, I put the site up for hosting on some cheap and cheerful hosting provider Google told me about. Offshore, of course. I also registered a close but not close enough to be sued domain name to reach it. The next step was to create some actual collateral for execution of my plan. After all, there was no point going to all this effort unless I was actually able to direct people to the builder's website. So I took a copy of the brochure for our house that the builder had conveniently left a few behind of in one of the kitchen drawers, and set about creating my own version of it. Similar principles as the website, no contact information except the website address, aka my website address. By this time I had made good friends with a few of my neighbors and we had taken to sharing a beer or two most nights on our front lawns. And wouldn't you know it, one of them was a manager for a local print shop. Given he already knew what hell we had been through with the builder, he took very little convincing to print off a run of my brochure for me on beautiful paper stock, nice and glossy, professional. I think it cost me half a dozen beers. Then came the final step in my plan. I waited for eager couples to turn up on my doorstep, eyes wide open in wonder at the beauty of the home they were going to pay the builder for their very own copy of. For the next 6 months or so, whenever one of these couples would turn up and knock on my door and explain their purpose, I would let them know that this model home was selling so quickly that the builder had asked if I could hand out his updated brochure so potential buyers could go online and look up whatever the current display home address was. I don't know how many brochures I handed out. Of the 100 my neighbor printed for me, I probably only had 2 or 3 dozen left, but I know I also handed a bunch out to mates so they could have a laugh. I'd estimate close to 40 prospective buyers got a copy of my brochure, and I reckon at least 50 to 20 of those came back to thank me for warning them. A few of them had already signed conditional contracts and managed to get out of them one way or another. I don't know what happened to that builder in the end. I split up with the missus not too long after, and she sold the place not too long after that. At the time of writing this, the builder's website is gone, the domain still appears to be registered in the company's name, and their state business registration still appears to be active. As best as I can tell, he is no longer at the last known address for the company, and I cannot find any mention of the company online that is not at least 6 years old. Hopefully the dude is out of business now, and hopefully the few dozen people I helped sidestep the pain of dealing with him were the beginning of the end of his crappy little enterprise. If you stayed this long, thanks for reading. Cheers. The next one is titled Boss Abused Me for Years, I Screwed Him Over and Won. So I'm a software engineer at a medium healthcare company, let's call it Arcade Health AH. Well, in the beginning of the pandemic, I started there. The team I was joining had like 5 to 6 offshore people on it before, and now they were dumping all of them for 2 onshore resources to save monetary capital. As such, we had Dingbat, my lead, myself and an older guy named Tim. Dingbat was my lead for the content management side, though I ended up having Angel also be another lead when Grim, Dingbat and I's functional manager, assigned me to another project. After about 6 months, it was apparent I was excelling in my role, but to assert her dominance, Dingbat called me on my personal number and yelled at me. So I tell Grim and he assures me it would be handled. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Now Grim and Dingbat have worked together almost half a decade and had a positive relationship. Grim came back and said, "It didn't happen." Well, fast forward a month, Dingbat has laid off and instead taken to harassing Tim. Tim was not a software engineer, but he was forced into being one, so Tim had a steep learning curve. So she questioned his intelligence multiple times and finally he had enough. And we had a meeting with Dingbat and Grim to say this is not cool. So Grim has to accept that Dingbat is actually not the person they portray. Well, things simmer down and Dingbat actually gets to be moderately okay to work with. Meanwhile, my project with Angel ramps up and I have less time to devote to Dingbat's project. Well, Dingbat forced me to do her project like I had nothing else going and assigned me an asinine amount of tickets. Angel cannot actually devote much time to the one we have because she is the lone engineer on another in total, so I have Dingbad's project and Angel's project, so I sit down with Grim and explain I have worked 80-hour weeks for a month. And by the way guys, just to quickly interject, what is the most you have ever worked in 1 week? Let me know in the comments, I am really curious. Either way, Grim takes me off Dingbad's project temporarily. He tells Dingbad she can only give me a handful of non-taxing tickets. Dingbad is mad but complies. At the yearly end, where our leads report to our managers, Angel basically gives me a glowing recommendation to get promoted. I created a solution that would indicate the key JSON value are intact for all models. Basically, if these screw up, the entire functionality is broken, so the user wouldn't be able to send data to the server as fields would need to be changed in the code. In total, this was a 2-month effort taking about 80 hours a week on its own. Dingbad calls me incompetent and says I have demonstrated a bad attitude. Mostly though, Dingbad always had negative comments, so after a while, yeah, you get annoyed. So, Dingbad's heavy criticism blocked my promotion that I was promised would come by Grim. Instead, Angel lobbied hard every meeting she could, insert it to make it clear to Grim that I worked hard, had a good attitude and deserved an upgrade. In the end though, Grim and Dingbad were closer friends or whatever. Fast forward 3 months, I am back on Dingbad's project. While I was away, she harassed Tim multiple times every day. She has nitpicked and criticized me at least twice literally every day since the new year when I was put back on the project. So I told Dingbad in a chat that how she acted was completely disrespectful to Tim and I. She didn't do something she was supposed to do, so I didn't know I needed to do a few tickets. Well, she added Grim the next day to the chat. Grim sets up a meeting and I outline what Dingbad has been doing since the start. Grim: I think you have been really disgruntled since being taken off Angel's project and you're taking it out on Dingbad. Me? No! Dingbad is harassing me every day as a verbal punching bag, has called me twice and cursed at me and creating an overall hostile work environment. None of this is new. Grim: you need to really see how others perceive you. This attitude comes off as negative. So, Grim gets his boss, Cherry. Cherry and Grim put me on a performance plan. In this plan I have to create a survey targeting the issues outlined in this plan, and I have to find a new area to work under within 6 months. In that meeting, they say,
you should really evaluate how you are seen by our team and decide if you wish to remain at this company and follow this PIP to a T. 1 toe out of place and you're gone.
I said, I didn't even think that was really that inappropriate. She brought it to that point anyway. If you look, I gave pretty clear indications not to bring it to that level, but she pressed the issue. Them:
I guess this is an exercise in learning how to speak to others and watch your words.
Strike number 1. So, Grim really harps on my forced survey. They are targeting as guiding that response, so I just let Grim write it for me. Basically, every survey comes back as this. OP has a really great attitude, is a pleasure to work with and is never negative at all. They focus on the issue and find a resolution. Strike number 2. Grim and Dingbad pretty much just assume I'm going to be there until the plan is up. They don't talk about my replacement. Meanwhile, I approach the manager of another team we work closely with on Dingbad's team and he did not have something. Yet another team did. Within 2 months, he set me up for an interview with this team. However, my positive reputation preceded me, so I was given the job. I had to put in a notice on my old position with the same company. Again, weird corporate HR rules. Up to this point, Grim just ignored my emails about a possible transition, passes off that I would get another position. Basically, no planning on me leaving for a few months. In my notice period, I had no new tickets, though I set up a system Dingbad claimed she wanted. Well, Dingbad gets all up in arms and just uses the WebEx quote feature for her own words. I said, I'm following the schematics you laid out. You said you wanted to press only a single button. You don't even have to press it if you don't want. Dingbad:
I don't care, it's not useful.
Grim: Dingbad, why are you fighting this? It is helpful. Dingbad:
fine, I will look at it. OP just has never made anything useful for us. They are not even technical.
My new job is actually way more technical than she has ever had to be. Grim: just try it, OP. Book the meeting.
Dingbat, it has to be a Wednesday because I'm so busy.
Me sends it out for Wednesday. Later on, Grim, can you do it for later or earlier? I have 3 hours of meetings already and this is my only slot of a break. Me, nope, sorry, Dingbat insisted Wednesday and this is the only time I have until I leave. Grim, oh, okay. Cherry hears about it and is pissed. Though she cannot touch me, I am on my notice and I've only done what I was asked, and it went like that for the next 2 weeks. On the way out, my incoming manager was like, why are you wearing so nice clothes into the office? Me tells the truth. I was told to by Grim whenever we came back. I was told slacks and a solid pilot with a tie. Grim, a week ago, why did I get asked by HR why I was forcing you to wear business casual? Me? Well, I did exactly what you said. I know by their tone he meant it as a guideline, but I followed it to a T. Grim, I got reprimanded for it. Me, I guess this is an exercise in learning how to speak to others and watch our words. Grim, no comment. Strike number 3, I told Tim on my way out that the way Dingbat is running the show is unsustainable, so with my absence entirely, he will be expected to learn more. Keep in mind, Tim is a senior citizen, so none of this is ideal. I hear the anguish in his voice. I told him to see and apply around to another team at the company. Well, that weekend, Tim's wife dies. May she rest in peace, but on his way out, Tim mentioned my comments and his wife passing as a reason that Tim has decided to retire. Now, Dingbat has zero help, has a system that basically does Tim's job she was expecting him to use, and has to work on 2 other systems for her migration project alone, while she waits 2 to 3 months for the whole corporate bureaucracy to replace us both. Meanwhile, I have a front row seat to see Dingbat's incompetence come back to bite her in the ass. MC revenge is sweet. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I hope you enjoyed today's stories and I see you again tomorrow.